The emergency department hummed in its overnight stillness, monitors beeping, fluorescent lights washing everything in pale yellow, the occasional squeak of rubber soles on polished linoleum. Sarah Winters moved through that silence like she'd been born into it. 29 years old. Mousy brown hair pulled back tight, pale green eyes that rarely met anyone's directly. A frame so slight that orderlies sometimes mistook her for a volunteer. 6 months at Crestview, still wearing the yellow probationary badge that marked her as unproven, untested, not quite real. The surgical nurses had stopped learning her name after week 3. "Hey, you." Dr. Marcus Holloway's voice cut from the physician's lounge, not bothering to look up from his phone. "Coffee's empty." Sarah paused at the doorway, medication tray balanced against her hip. "I can make a fresh pot after I finish." Now would be better. She set the tray down and moved to the coffee station. Her hands didn't shake. They never did, actually. But nobody had thought to notice that particular detail. Marcus Holloway was 42 and carried himself like he knew it. Chief of Emergency Medicine. 3 published papers. A reputation for diagnostic brilliance that he wore like armor over the personality defects everyone pretended not to see. "You're the new one," he said, still scrolling. "Winters." "Yes, doctor." "Trauma background?" "Civilian." He finally glanced up, his expression cycling through dismissal and mild amusement. "Thought so. You've got that look, like you learned everything from textbooks." He stood, straightening his white coat. "Real trauma isn't like the simulation, sweetheart. When it matters, you'll freeze. They always do." Sarah handed him the coffee. "I'll keep that in mind." "See that you do." He walked out. Sarah returned to her medication cart. Her face stayed neutral, practiced, empty. Only the faintest tightening of her jaw betrayed anything at all, and it was gone before anyone could catch it. The charge nurse, Patricia Wade, materialized beside her with the territorial instinct of someone defending their domain from an intruder. 16 years at Crestview. Senior enough to be protected. Sharp enough to protect herself. "Don't take it personally," Patricia said, though her tone suggested Sarah absolutely should. "Dr. Holloway has saved more lives than you've seen in your entire career. He's earned the right to be direct." She lowered her voice. "And between us, probationary nurses who make waves don't usually make it past review." Sarah nodded, filed that threat alongside the others, and continued her rounds. In room 7, she found an elderly woman sleeping fitfully. Dorothy Mitchell, 73, admitted 6 hours earlier with chest pains. Tests inconclusive, awaiting cardiology in the morning. Sarah checked the monitors. Heart rate elevated, blood pressure climbing. Oxygen saturation dropping, gradually, steadily, silently. She stepped into the hallway. "Patricia. Mrs. Mitchell's presenting signs of..." "She's stable." Patricia cut her off. "Cardiology sees her at 7. Don't wake Dr. Holloway for every little fluctuation. Her stats are trending wrong. Then document it." Patricia's smile was all teeth. "That's what probationary nurses do. They document. They don't diagnose." Sarah returned to room 7. Her handwriting in the chart was clean, precise, clinical, no editorializing. Just facts that someone might read later and wonder why nobody acted sooner. At 2:47 a.m., the VIP lounge doors opened. Robert Castellan emerged, looking like death in a tailored suit. 61 years old, real estate developer. 3 buildings in downtown Millbrook bore his name. His wife walked half a step behind him, her face tight with the worry she'd been trained since birth not to show too obviously in public. Sarah noticed him immediately. Not because of who he was, but because of how he moved. Shuffling steps, one hand pressed to his chest, breathing too fast and too shallow. The overhead lights caught the sheen of sweat on his forehead. She set down the supply cart and approached. "Sir, are you feeling all right?" Castellan waved her off. "Fine, just tired." But his neck veins bulged like cables under tension. His lips held the faintest blue tinge around the edges. And when Sarah got close enough, she heard the wheeze beneath his words. Not exhaustion, but something mechanical and wrong. "Mr. Castellan, I think you should sit down. I'm leaving." He took another step and wobbled. Sarah moved to his side. "Please, just for a moment." Something in her voice made him stop, not commanding exactly, but absolutely certain. He lowered himself into the nearest chair, leaning forward instinctively, unable to sit back fully. Classic positioning for someone whose body was fighting for oxygen it couldn't process. She'd seen this before, not in textbooks. "How long have you been having trouble breathing?" "Started about an hour ago. Thought it was anxiety." "Any chest pressure radiating to your jaw or arm?" "A little." Sarah looked at his wife. "When did you arrive tonight?" 10 o'clock. He was having palpitations. They ran tests, said everything looked normal, told us to wait for the attending. 4 hours in the VIP lounge. 4 hours while something catastrophic brewed inside him. Sarah straightened. "Wait here, don't move." She found Marcus Holloway in the physician's lounge, halfway through a sandwich, reviewing files on his tablet. "The patient in the VIP lounge," she said. "Robert Castellan. He's in acute distress, jugular vein distension, labored breathing, cyanosis around the mouth. I think he's developing cardiac tamponade." Marcus looked up slowly. His expression cycled through irritation, disbelief, and something close to amusement. "You think?" "Yes." "Based on your extensive diagnostic experience?" "Based on his presentation." Marcus set down his tablet with exaggerated care. "Let me explain something to you, Winters. Robert Castellan had a full cardiac workup 3 hours ago. EKG normal, troponin normal, chest X-ray clear. 3 physicians examined him." He stood. "You really think you know better than all of them combined?" "I think something's changed." "Of course something's changed. He's been sitting in a waiting room for 4 hours. He's tired and stressed." He stepped closer. "Here's what's actually happening. You're a probationary nurse trying to look important by manufacturing a crisis. I've seen it 100 times. Young nurses who watch too much television and think they're going to be heroes." His voice dropped. "This is your first warning. Next time you interrupt me with amateur dramatics, it goes in your file. Are we clear?" Behind him, Patricia Wade stood in the doorway, her face arranged in sympathetic disapproval. Sympathy for Marcus. Disapproval for Sarah. "Crystal," Sarah said. She walked away. Her footsteps were measured and even. Nothing in her posture suggested defeat, just compliance. The appearance of knowing her place, but her hands clenched briefly at her sides. A movement so small and controlled it barely qualified as a gesture. Back at her station, Sarah printed a time-stamped copy of her observations and tucked them into her personal notebook. Not the official chart, her own record, just in case. At 3:17 a.m., she checked on Castellan again. He could barely speak without gasping now. His wife's composure was cracking like old paint. "Someone needs to help him," she said when Sarah approached. "Please." Sarah crouched beside his chair. His pulse was thready and rapid. His skin had taken on a grayish cast. "Mr. Castellan, you are experiencing a medical emergency. Your body is telling you something is very wrong. Do you understand?" He managed a weak nod. "Good. I'm going to get help." "You already tried," his wife said bitterly. Sarah stood. "Then I'll make them listen." She walked back to the physician's lounge. Same measured pace. But something had shifted in her bearing. The slight hunch of her shoulders straightened. The downward cast of her eyes lifted. "Dr. Holloway." "Jesus Christ." He slammed his tablet down. "What now?" "Robert Castellan is dying." The word hung in the air like a grenade. "If you don't examine him in the next 5 minutes, he's going to arrest. And when he does, every decision you made tonight becomes part of the record." Patricia gasped. Marcus went very still. Later, he would try to explain what he saw in her face. Not fear or desperation or the theatrical panic of someone exaggerating for effect. Something calm and absolutely certain. the expression of someone who'd already calculated all the outcomes and accepted the worst one. "Fine," he said quietly. "Let's go prove you wrong." They reached the VIP lounge, and Marcus saw Castellan, and his training took over instantly. "Get me a portable ultrasound," he barked. "Now!" The scan showed a massive pericardial effusion, fluid crushing the heart from the outside. Marcus went pale. "How the hell did we miss this?" Sarah said nothing. They both already knew. They'd run their tests hours ago when the condition was just beginning, and then they'd stopped looking. For the next 12 minutes, Sarah existed in a space she'd hoped never to visit again, the heightened focus of life-or-death medicine, where every second carried weight and every movement branched into futures of survival or loss. Her hands moved automatically. Supplies appeared in Marcus's grip before he asked for them. Nothing wasted, nothing hesitant. When the fluid finally drained, Castellan's color returned. His breathing eased. His wife sobbed with relief. Marcus stepped back and, for the first time since Sarah had started at Crestview, looked at her. Really looked. "How did you know?" he asked quietly. "I've seen it before." "Where?" Before she could answer, the building shook. Not a tremor, not traffic. Something massive and catastrophic traveling through the foundation like a physical blow. The lights flickered. Ceiling tiles shifted. Deep in the infrastructure, something had just gone terribly wrong. Then the emergency system screamed to life. Code black, code black. Explosion in the administrative wing. Multiple casualties. The second explosion hit before anyone could process the first. The floor buckled, windows shattered inward. The overhead lights died, replaced by dim red emergency glow. And then the screaming started. Not distant, not abstract. Right there in the emergency department. Marcus stumbled. His earlier authority fragmented in the face of chaos he couldn't diagnose. Sarah grabbed his arm, pulling him upright, her grip harder than should have been possible for someone her size. "We stabilize this department before we help anyone else," she said. Her voice cut through the noise with surgical precision. "Secure the patients, account for staff, establish a triage point, then we move. Who the hell are you to... Do you want to argue, or do you want to save lives?" Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, nodded. "Good. Get me a head count." Sarah moved through the emergency department like someone who'd done this before. She called out orders in a voice that didn't yell, but somehow carried over everything, checking structural integrity, identifying patients who could be moved, organizing scattered staff into functional units. Patricia Wade stared at her as though witnessing something she couldn't explain. A young resident stumbled out of the supply room, blood streaming from his forehead. "Pressure on that wound," Sarah told him. "Then help me move Mrs. Mitchell. Her room is compromised." They wheeled Dorothy's bed into the interior hallway together. The elderly woman was awake, terrified, clutching Sarah's hand. "You're safe," Sarah told her. "Stay with me." Marcus reappeared, phone pressed to his ear. "Fire department is 10 minutes out. At least 20 casualties in the administrative wing. Executive offices took a direct hit. Gas explosion." Sarah was already moving toward the stairwell. "4th floor," she said. "Anyone still up there?" "Communications are down. We don't know." She tested the stairwell door. Warm, but not hot. She pulled it open and stared up into smoke-choked darkness. "Winters, don't." Marcus's voice turned sharp. She looked back at him. The emergency lighting painted her face in harsh red shadows. For a moment, she was someone else entirely. Someone who'd made harder decisions than this. "Stay here and coordinate," she said. "Evacuate stable patients. Set up triage in the parking lot. When fire department arrives, send them to the 4th floor." "You can't go up there. You don't have gear. You don't have training." "Yes," Sarah said quietly. "I do." And she was gone. She climbed through darkness and smoke, pulling her scrub top over her nose and mouth, her eyes watering, but her pace never slowing. The chemical tang of natural gas thickened with every step. The 4th floor was a war zone, Desks overturned, walls collapsed, small fires burning across scattered debris. The ceiling had partially caved in, burying workstations under tons of wreckage. And in the center of it all, pinned beneath a steel beam, was Dr. Richard Vance, Director of Emergency Services, conscious, barely, his right shoulder pierced by a length of rebar. "Help me," he gasped. "I can't feel my legs." Sarah dropped beside him, her hands already assessing the damage with practiced efficiency. The beam had him trapped, but hadn't crushed him completely. The rebar was deep enough to bleed seriously, not deep enough to kill him immediately. The fires spreading toward them. That was the real clock. She stripped off her scrub top and tore it into strips. "This is going to hurt," she told him. "Don't fight it." She packed the wound and wrapped it tight. Vance screamed. She didn't stop. When the shoulder was secured, she turned to the beam. Too heavy to lift directly. Not enough leverage. She scanned the ruined office, cataloging resources. A filing cabinet at an angle, office chairs, computer cables. There. She built a crude lever system using the filing cabinet as a fulcrum, positioning the chairs to create mechanical advantage that would have made a physics teacher wince but might actually work. "When I lift, you pull yourself backward," she told Vance. "Don't think, don't hesitate. Just move." She gripped the improvised lever. Her arms shook, not from fear, but from the simple reality of trying to move several 100 pounds of steel with inadequate equipment. 1, 2, 3. She threw her entire weight against it. For a horrible moment, nothing happened. Then the beam shifted, just an inch. Vance dragged himself backward with a howl of agony. Sarah released the lever and let it crash down. He was free. "Can you walk?" "No." "Then I'm carrying you." She got him into a fireman's carry and started back toward the stairwell, moving through smoke and heat and the groaning protests of a building that wanted to collapse. Behind them, one of the small fires found something combustible and roared upward. Sarah didn't look back. She just kept moving. They were halfway down the stairs when firefighters materialized through the smoke below, taking Vance's weight with practiced speed. They emerged into the parking lot together. Fresh air, ambulances, portable lights, the organized chaos of emergency response. Marcus saw her come out of the building and froze. She was covered in soot and blood and ceiling dust. Her hair had escaped its ponytail in smoke-darkened tangles. She looked like she'd been through a war, because she had been. He walked toward her slowly. "You just pulled my supervisor out of a collapsing building." "Someone had to." "Where did you learn to do that?" Sarah met his eyes. Later, she'd wish she'd deflected, made something up, protected the truth a few hours longer. Instead, she told him. "Fallujah," she said quietly. "Kandahar. A dozen other places you've probably never heard of. I was a combat medic for 6 years before I became a civilian nurse." Silence stretched between them. "You're military," Marcus said. "And you didn't think to mention that when you applied? Would you have treated me differently if I had?" She said it without accusation, just curiosity. But Marcus flinched, because they both knew the answer. By dawn, the last patient had been transferred, and the building declared structurally unsafe. Sarah sat on the curb outside Crestview's ruined entrance, her body aching, her lungs burned from smoke inhalation, her yellow probationary badge lost somewhere in the wreckage. Marcus sat down beside her without asking permission. For a long moment, neither spoke. "I was wrong about you," he finally said. "Yes. I should have listened when you warned me about Castellan. Yes. And I shouldn't have dismissed you as inexperienced." He was quiet for a moment. "You saved lives tonight. Castellan, Vance, others we haven't counted yet. And you did it after I treated you like you were invisible." "I'm used to being invisible," Sarah said quietly. "In the military, I learned that being underestimated is sometimes an advantage. People don't watch you as carefully, don't question your movements. And when the moment comes, when you're actually needed, you're already in position. Is that why you didn't tell anyone about your background?" Partly. But also, she paused. I didn't want to be the veteran nurse. I wanted to be just a nurse. Start over. Leave the war behind. Looks like the war found you anyway. Sarah smiled without humor. It usually does. By mid-morning, 3 things happened in rapid succession. Robert Castellan's wife called the hospital demanding answers about why her husband's symptoms had been dismissed. The call was logged, time-stamped, and impossible to ignore. A veteran firefighter who'd helped extract Vance from the wreckage recognized Sarah's techniques as military-grade training and noted it in his incident report. And Patricia Wade pulled Sarah aside in the temporary break area and said something Sarah never expected to hear. I was wrong about you. Patricia's voice was stiff with the effort of admission. And I'm sorry. I watched you last night. You didn't panic, didn't freeze. You just knew what to do. And I've been a nurse for 16 years, and I didn't know half of what you did. She met Sarah's eyes. I'm sorry for dismissing you, for protecting the physicians when I should have been protecting the patients. Apology accepted. Patricia nodded once and walked away. Sarah stood there wondering if crisis had just rewritten the social order of an entire hospital in the space of 8 hours. The administrative meeting that followed was precisely what Sarah had expected. A room full of executives calculating liability with every word. Interim CEO Angela Reeves sat at the head of the table, expression professionally neutral. Miss Winters, we're trying to understand the sequence of events regarding patient Robert Castellan, specifically your interactions with Dr. Holloway before his treatment. Sarah stated her account cleanly, clinically, without drama. Reeves pressed. But Dr. Holloway initially dismissed your concerns. He exercised his medical judgment based on earlier test results. When the patient's condition deteriorated, he revised that judgment and provided appropriate care. Dr. Holloway saved Mr. Castellan's life. That's what matters. Across the table, Marcus looked at her with something approaching wonder. Before Reeves could redirect, the conference room door opened without a knock. Robert Castellan walked in, alive, visibly angry, flanked by his attorney. I should be dead, he said flatly. According to my cardiologist, I was roughly 15 minutes from cardiac arrest when Nurse Winters convinced Dr. Holloway to act. He set a folder on the table. There's security footage from the VIP lounge, timestamps showing her examining me, reporting her concerns, returning when I deteriorated further. All documented. He looked at Reeves. So before you continue whatever liability exercise this is, ask yourself what happens when I share that footage with my attorney. Silence. I'm not here to threaten anyone, Castellan continued, though his tone suggested otherwise. I'm here to thank Miss Winters and to inform you that I'm making a substantial donation to this hospital contingent on certain personnel changes, starting with ending her probationary status today, and an apology for whatever this meeting was intended to accomplish. He walked out. Reeves sat down slowly. Miss Winters, she said carefully, your probationary period is concluded as of today. I don't want advancement, Sarah said. I want to do my job without being treated as incompetent. She left the conference room and found Marcus waiting in the hallway. You didn't have to protect me in there. I wasn't protecting you, she said. I was being accurate. She walked away. And this time, Marcus didn't follow, just stood in the hallway trying to reconcile everything he thought he knew about competence and hierarchy and the quiet nurse who had just dismantled all of it. 3 days later, the investigation changed everything. Fire Marshal Rebecca Torres confirmed what Captain Ramirez had suspected. The gas line had been deliberately severed. Clean cut. Someone with specific knowledge and access. Security footage from the administrative corridor showed a maintenance worker near the gas line access panel at 211p.m, the day of the explosion. Nobody scheduled for gas line work that day. Sarah described him to the sketch artist, mid-40s, strong jaw, dark coveralls, eyes that registered nothing. Slowly, across 2 hours, a face emerged. Torres ran it through databases. Thomas Breer, former facilities maintenance supervisor at Crestview, terminated 3 years ago after complaints about insubordination, had filed a wrongful termination lawsuit that went nowhere, made documented threats against administration, flagged as high risk, never charged. He had found real safety violations. He'd been punished for reporting them, and somewhere in those 3 years of silence and loss, his righteous anger had curdled into something catastrophic. 6 people had died. That night, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message she would never forget. Unknown number. You shouldn't have survived the explosion. That's twice you've interfered. There won't be a third time. She sat perfectly still in her car and read it twice, then forwarded it immediately to Captain Ramirez. His response came back in seconds. Don't go inside your apartment. Stay in your car. Police en route. She looked up at her building. 3rd floor, end unit, windows she'd left cracked for air. And her training transformed it instantly from home into tactical problem. Sight lines, blind corners, escape routes, ambush positions. She backed out of her parking space and drove 2 blocks to park under a convenience store's security lights, engine running, watching her street in the rearview mirror. 10 minutes later, patrol cars surrounded her building with lights dark. She wasn't alone. Not yet. The plan that Detective Foster, Torres, and Ramirez eventually agreed on was straightforward and uncomfortable. Sarah would return to Crestview the next morning for her scheduled shift. They would leak her location through channels Breer was likely monitoring. When he appeared, and Foster believed he would, given the surveillance pattern and the escalating threats, units positioned throughout the hospital would move. What if he doesn't come? Sarah asked. He'll come, Foster said. He's fixated. Question is whether you can hold it together when he does. I can. They moved at 700. 2 hours passed, then 3. Nothing. And then, at 2 p.m., while Sarah was eating lunch in the hospital cafeteria, someone sat down across from her. Thomas Breer, in a visitor's badge and volunteer shirt, calm as winter. Don't scream, he said quietly. Don't run. And don't reach for that earpiece unless you want to see how many people die before your police friends can get here. His hand rested on the table. Beneath it, partially visible through his shirt, was the outline of a dead man's switch. He had walked into a hospital full of law enforcement wearing a bomb. Sarah's training took over before conscious thought could catch up. Body language neutral. No sudden movements. No visible fear. Her hands stayed still on the table. Her breathing stayed even. She set down her sandwich with deliberate care. Skip the posturing, she said quietly. What do you want? He talked for 12 minutes. About 80-hour weeks maintaining a hospital that had treated him as disposable, about flagging the gas line 2 years before it killed anyone, about signing off on faulty electrical work being the line he wouldn't cross, about the lawsuit that went nowhere, the blacklisting that followed, the house they lost. I tried your way, he said. Complaints, documentation, proper channels. They ignored me because I was one person, a maintenance worker. His voice was controlled, but his eyes were hollow. Nobody cares about the people who keep the lights on until the lights go out. You're not wrong, Sarah said carefully. About the violations, about being dismissed. I've been documenting problems at this hospital for 6 months. She held his gaze. But you're about to kill people who had nothing to do with firing you. The janitors, the cafeteria staff, the patients who are already victims of the same system you're angry at. Breer's hand tightened fractionally on the switch. You want accountability? Sarah continued. Then let me be your witness. The right way. I'm the combat veteran the media has been covering. If I stand up and say this hospital has systemic safety problems, with your documentation as evidence, people will listen. You're trying to talk me down. I'm offering you a choice between dying as a mass murderer and surviving as someone who actually changed something. She leaned forward slightly. Dead terrorists make headlines for a week and then get forgotten. You want your cause to matter? Stay alive to see it through. Silence. Around them, the cafeteria continued its ordinary rhythm. Silverware clattering, conversations humming, life happening in complete ignorance of how close it was to ending. Breer stared at her for a long moment. She watched the war happening behind his eyes. Rage fighting reason, destruction fighting the memory of someone who used to fix things instead of break them. His finger hovered on the switch. Then, with a sound like something giving way, he moved his hand, placed both palms flat on the table. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." The cafeteria erupted into controlled chaos as tactical officers moved in from 3 directions. Sarah stepped back and watched them work. Her legs were suddenly weak, not from fear, but from the simple biology of adrenaline finally running out. Foster appeared at her elbow, his face pale with a complicated mixture of anger and something that might have been admiration. "That was the most reckless thing I've ever witnessed," he said. "Did it work?" He rubbed his face. "Yeah, it worked." The investigation that followed consumed months. Breer's documentation confirmed everything. Maintenance logs, inspection reports, internal memos showing a systematic pattern of deferred safety repairs across 5 years, all signed off by senior administration, all prioritizing cost savings over the lives of the people inside the building. Angela Reeves resigned. Richard Vance lost his medical license. Multiple criminal negligence convictions followed. Wrongful death settlements totaled millions. And Crestview Memorial, stripped of its gleaming facade, began the slow and painful work of actually becoming what it had always claimed to be. Sarah was offered 2 things in the aftermath: a position as Director of Patient Safety at Robert Castellan's new trauma center, full authority, complete autonomy, a budget to build something right from the foundation, and the position of Director of Nursing at Crestview itself, less prestige, more complexity, the chance to fix something broken from the inside. She took the second one. "Building something new is important," she told Castellan when she declined his offer. "But fixing something broken is harder, and Crestview is broken in ways that need someone willing to stay." Castellan laughed. "You'll have my full support regardless, and an open invitation if you change your mind." 6 weeks after the bombing, Crestview Memorial reopened. New management, new protocols, new culture. Sarah stood at the nurses' station on her first official morning as director, reviewing safety procedures she'd written herself. Every concern she'd documented over 6 months had been addressed. Every violation corrected. Every voice that had been silenced now had a formal reporting channel with mandatory investigation requirements. Marcus brought 2 cups of coffee. "Ready for this?" "No," Sarah said, "but I'm doing it anyway." "Good answer." He surveyed the emergency department, functional again, bearing the marks of what it had survived. "I've been thinking about something you said during testimony, that systems don't change because of heroes." He paused. "I think you were wrong about the heroes part." Sarah waited. "Heroes don't have to be dramatic," he said. "They just have to show up, keep fighting, refuse to accept that broken things can't be fixed." He met her eyes. "You did that, and you showed the rest of us how." "I just did my job." "Exactly." Marcus almost smiled. "That's what made it heroic." The emergency department doors opened. The first patient of the day arrived, an elderly woman with chest pains, frightened but trying not to show it. Sarah watched closely as the intake nurse began the standard workup, making sure every protocol was followed, every concern documented, every voice heard. Patricia joined them at the station reviewing the patient board. "Full house already," she said. "Some things never change." "Some things shouldn't," Sarah replied, "as long as we do them right." On the anniversary of her first day at Crestview Memorial, Sarah stood in the same emergency department where she'd started. Invisible, dismissed, probationary. She was none of those things anymore. But standing there in her scrubs with a patient chart in her hands, she didn't feel like any of the titles that had replaced them either. She just felt like a nurse doing her job, seeing people, fighting for them, showing up even when it cost her. Her phone buzzed. The State Nursing Board, reiterating their offer to lead a statewide safety reform task force. National platform. Policy development. The chance to change systems at scale. She typed her response. "Thank you." but I'm staying where I am. Change doesn't happen from advisory boards. It happens in emergency departments at 2 a.m. when someone refuses to accept that broken systems are inevitable. That's my work. That's my fight. She sent it and returned to her rounds because Sarah Winters had learned something across 6 months of being dismissed, 6 years of military service, and 1 catastrophic week of bombs and courage and choosing to stay when running was easier. She'd learned that power wasn't about titles or recognition or national platforms. Power was showing up. Power was seeing people, really seeing them, when everyone else looked through them. Power was being underestimated and using that underestimation as leverage, being invisible until the moment visibility mattered most. She was a nurse, not the decorated kind, not the famous kind, just the kind who showed up and fought and refused to accept that people were disposable, and in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything.